Hey everybody, I'm Greg Soul and welcome to another CIQ demo. So today I'm going to be building a playbook. Sorry, I'm laughing because I got somebody over here laughing at me. I'm going to be building a playbook that's going to demonstrate idempotency. So in a nutshell, idempotency means I can rerun a playbook multiple times. If I need to make a change, I will. If it doesn't need to make a change, it won't, right? And really, Ansible and Ascender, whenever it doesn't need to make a change, it'll just say, okay. When it does need to make a change, it'll say change, right? So it actually will indicate to you all that stuff. And why this is important is somebody was asking on the internet, well, it's like, well, how do I achieve that with shell commands? And so I'm going to show you kind of a way to sort of fake that. And there are other commands. It's not just in like system operations like with Linux or Windows, but I run into it a lot in networking as well, right? So there are ways you can throw commands at something and it assumes it's always making a change. And that's definitely the way it works in systems with shell commands. So let me pull up my VS Code Studio. So I'm going to start out writing a playbook really quick. As you all remember, you start with 3 dashes. So I did a playbook the other day, kind of a challenge on, and this one is Idempotent shell scripts is what we'll call it. I did one on like working through errors and problems you're going to run into. So I challenge you guys to go and attempt that one first and then watch the video and see how it all plays out. But in there, I cover a lot of these common tips and tricks. So hosts, I'm going to be going against Greg Rocky 9, just one of my test hosts in the environment. I'm going to do gather facts false. And this turns off the fact collection portion, right? So gathering facts means I will connect to a host and I'll pull a whole bunch of really cool variabilized information that I can use for reporting or in my automations to do conditionals and stuff like that. But honestly, if I'm not going to use it, I'm going to turn it off. And by default, I always have it off at the top of all my stuff because it saves time, right? It saves processing time. I don't have to wait for that task to connect to these things and pull all that back. So there it is. I'm going to create a var section at the top. This is where I put variables that are going to apply to everything in here. I create it even if I don't use it. It's kind of like my documentation section. Tasks. There we are. Had my hand on the wrong spot on the keyboard. So in here, we're going to start one and we're going to name it create a dummy file. Because I want to just create a file in there, and then I think what I'll do is I'll delete it. So the create file is not necessarily going to be the idempotent part. But you know what? Let's go ahead and do it idempotently. So in a shell command, let me see, what would I do in a shell command? Let me pull this down right here. If I was going to do it in a shell, I would do something like, I would do an echo, I'm always hungry. And if you know me, that is absolutely the truth. I would pipe that to test1.txt. All right, now it's created it and I can cat that file. And you can see I'm always hungry. It's in there, right? So that's kind of a quick and dirty way of creating a file. So I could do that on the shell for Ansible, but it's always going to register a change, right? So even if that file exists in the state that it should, it's going to recreate that file, right? Over and over and over. And I don't necessarily want it to do that, right? Like kind of that's the idempotent nature of shell stuff. It assumes every time you run a shell command that it's making a change because it technically could be, even if I'm just displaying information. So you don't always want it to show that. So instead of doing that, instead of just issuing, because let me show you exactly how I would do it. In here, I would just copy that. In here, I would do Ansible.builtin.shell. And then I would throw that command in there. And guess what? It would fire that off. And every single time, it would create that file. Only I don't want it to do that. I want to do this in more of an idempotent fashion. So I'm going to use Ansible.builtin.copy. I think it's copy that has the, is it the content parameter? I'm sitting here guessing. How about I just look it up really fast? Ansible, right here. Ansible copy module. Pop into here really quick. Go to my example section, content. Yeah, there it is, right there. Yeah, so it's content and then destination. So content is just what's going to be inside the file. Destination, where am I sticking it? All right, so it should be content, and I will say I'm always hungry. And then it was DEST for destination, and we'll put it in the temp directory, temp, and we'll call it test1.txt. So that's the file that it's going to create on my remote host, and the contents of said file will be I'm always hungry. Now, the very first time it's going to create it, if I rerun that file already exists in its current state, guess what? It's not going to do anything. It's just going to say, okay, so we've got that. That's a decent example of idempotency. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that file. Delete the dummy file. Let me capitalize that D, otherwise it's going to drive me absolutely crazy. And we're doing the shell module, so that's ansible.builtin.shell, and then I'm going to do rm/tmp/test1.txt. We'll finish that out, and I'll do a -force and V for verbose. Because I think if I just do rm test1.txt-force, right? See, it doesn't actually give me any output. It's not actually saying, hey, anything happened. So let me do an ls. See, it actually did delete it, but it didn't tell me anything about it. So let me recreate the file. And I think if I do -v, see, it actually gives me some output. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to collect that output. I'm going to use that to determine whether it is changed or not. I'm going to use that for my conditional. So I'm going to do -f for force and V for verbose. So now what I'm going to do is, you know what? I'll just save this one and I'll fire it off, and then we'll add some extra stuff to it. So I'm going to go ahead and save. Add a comment, and I will synchronize it. Don't forget to sync your changes. I do that every single time, then I can't figure out why things don't change. So I'm going to use an existing inventory item I have. Inventories, again, are just big lists of all the stuff I could potentially operate against. I'm using a generic Git repository, my miscellaneous one. And so in the project section, that's where I actually tie these things together. So I will hit the edit button on here so you can see it's just my miscellaneous repository with just a bunch of weird random stuff in there. So I've really got all the pieces I need. So I'm going to come in here to job templates. I'm going to click add job template, and I'll say idempotent, which is such a weird word to spell, shell demo. Click on inventory, and I'll do my generic inventory. Yep, that one. And then project, it's going to be my miscellaneous project right there. I will select it. I'm laughing because my cat's beating up the blinds over here. Playbook. So once I choose my project, it actually shows me all of them. And I've got my idempotent-shell in there. Credentials. I'll use just my lab credentials right there. So I should be done. I can save and let me launch it. And let's see what I messed up, because I always screw something up. And through the magic of editing, you don't have to wait for any of this. We'll just come back when it's done. Quick commercial break. So here at CIQ, we absolutely love helping customers build their automation environment as well as their automation practice. We have also become experts in migrating from one flavor of enterprise Linux over to another. I think you know which one is going to be my preferred for you to move to. So if you need help with enterprise Linux or migrations or automation, please give us a holler. Plus, Jimmy's getting bored and he tends to get really annoying when that happens. So I genuinely need your help to keep him busy. So drop us an email. All right. Well, it looks like I had my syntax correct on a lot of this stuff. So created the dummy file. It says changed. It's obviously going to say changed because nothing was there. If I actually want more detailed info, I can just kind of click on it, go to the JSON section, and it'll show me detailed information on all the things that it did, which is really cool, right? So I can go back after the fact. By default, it's going to store all this stuff in a Cinder, right? Like in this interface, it's going to store all of it for 90 days. I can adjust that to keep it longer or shorter. I can also log all this stuff off. But right here, we see changed, right? We deleted the file. But honestly, even if we didn't delete the file, it's still going to show change. Let me show you a demonstration of that. So I will, right here, I will copy that. We'll paste, and so I'll say delete a second dummy file, only we're going to name it test2, right? A file that doesn't actually exist. Save that, dd, commit, sync those changes. I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to relaunch the job. So on this project, which ultimately ties to my Git repository, I have an option in there called update on launch, right? So if I go into my projects, here I can look for my miscellaneous one. I'll edit it really quick and I'll scroll down and say update revision on launch. So what that essentially does is whenever I launch a job, it will first check to see if it has the newest version. So, right, so it'll connect to my Git repository and it'll refresh all those files. Now it does add a little bit of processing time because it has to sync that project again. But when I'm developing, it's so convenient to just come in here and launch and launch and launch. Otherwise, if I update the playbook in my Git repository, I have to come in here and I have to manually synchronize it. So instead of doing that while developing, I keep update revision on launch in there. So let's pop back over. It has successfully completed. I'm going to go to output and you can see delete a secondary dummy file. There was no file, right? There's absolutely nothing. This, I could have just done some kind of informational command. I could have like shown the clock, or I could have listed out the contents of a directory, and it's going to show changed every time. Even though the command has zero opportunity to actually make a change, it's going to show changed, right? So I don't like that behavior necessarily. So I could, for operational purposes, for whatever reason, I could potentially need to only see change when a change happens. Maybe it's a compliance thing, right? Don't show change unless change actually happened. So let's update our playbook a little bit to make that happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this output. I'm going to say register, and registering a variable basically means take the contents of everything that happens in this task, save it into a variable name, and I will put it as remove check. And then I will add a conditional in here on change. So I can tell it, hey, only register a change when it meets this criteria. So I can say changed when. And let me set it up here. It's a little bit weird. If I just want to look in the contents, I'm going to say if it says removed, right? Because if I look at my CLI command, it says removed in the file name. So if it just has removed in there, I know it actually did make a change. Otherwise, if it's just completely null, I think it just shows up as completely null, right? Like if I remove the file again, yeah. So if I remove a file that doesn't actually exist, it just shows nothing, right? So if it shows up as absolutely nothing, then we know nothing actually happened. So if it has removed in there, removed in remove underscore check dot std out. So by default, whenever you're registering variables, it actually collects a whole bunch of things. One, it'll be like remove underscore check dot change. It'll tell me whether it thought there was a change or not. But then there's also std out, which just takes everything that got spit out and it puts it in that variable. And there's also std out underscore lines. So it'll actually kind of put line breaks in there, which is convenient for like viewing some information or maybe iterating over it as a list. But here I just want to check, hey, the remove underscore check std out, like just what came back from it, does it have the word removed in there? So if it does, that means it actually changed. And then that should be it. So that should be good there. Let me save that. Commit, let me sync it, and then we'll launch it again. All right, so it actually met the criteria for change, right? It always will. So the very first thing we're doing is creating that dummy file, and it's always going to remove it. So let's add that to the second one. So we should theoretically see the second one show up as just okay. So if I come in here, I'm going to change, or rather, I'm going to copy this. Actually, and copy both of these lines. Go to the end, paste these in, and I'll say remove check 2 is what will make it. Removed and remove check 2. Save it. Commit. Sync those changes. Let's launch it again. All right, here we are. So now we did the conditional check for the second one. There is no file, which means it's going to show up as empty. So our changed condition wasn't met, so it actually doesn't say oh changed, right? So this one, it definitely did remove. It showed removed, so it says changed. This one, there was nothing for it to remove, so it just says okay. Totally awesome, right? So it's complete. Now you could, and sometimes this is required, you could need to adjust when something errors out. So I've had some shell commands when you throw a command at it, whatever like the binary is you're like operating on, for whatever reason, it wants to register back to the shell that there was actually an error, that it failed for some reason, even though it didn't, right? It's kind of like a false positive. So you can adjust that behavior as well. So you can say failed when, and then set a conditional in here. So I'm going to say if remove check to, we'll say remove check to std out is equal to null, right? Like, so if it is blank, then that's an error, right? Like in this condition, this isn't maybe necessarily valid or whatever, but in some binaries before, you want to set an arbitrary piece of information in there, and this is a quick and simple way of doing it. So this, instead of just saying okay, like it completed all right, since it's meeting our failed when condition of, oh no, the return output was empty, it should actually show failed on this job. There we have it. So it's actually showing failed. Now this can halt the operation, right? If I actually want it to just register that it failed and I want it to actually continue on, there's another option I can add in here. So I can say ignore errors, and I can set that to true. And so again, this is another task level parameter that says, hey, if you see errors in here, go ahead and continue processing, right? So it's going to log that. It's going to see that it failed, but it'll continue processing all the way through. So in here, I'm going to go ahead and relaunch. All right, so you can see here that everything completed successfully. It showed the dummy file created as change. The deleted dummy file actually showed change, right? Because it actually did meet our change criteria. It showed remove in there. The other task, it hit the failed condition because it had, the empty std out, but we had ignore errors, so it went ahead and completed all the way through. And you can look it down at the play recap. It shows failed 0, right? So it actually allowed it to completely move all the way through. Now we could adjust this where we add some asserts. That's another interesting way of looking for failures or conditional stuff to kind of break your playbook to like make it actually stop in there. So there's other modifications you can do. I'm really curious if you would tweak or tune this. Did this give you some additional insight on how you can maybe potentially bake some idempotency into your playbooks using commands that have unexpected results in there? If you have any questions, comments, again, throw them our way. We'd love to help folks. I would love to help engage. If you have any need for automation, I'd love to come in, help you build your automation practice, help build playbooks, help build out your Ascender infrastructure. Let us know how we can help. So if nothing else, happy automating, happy idempotenting, and we'll see you next time. Bye.